All right, Patrick, there is news out there in the world of baseball that we have to discuss. A few non Rockies things that we want to talk about because they may very quickly become Rockies things. It's hard to know what's going to stay in its own little corner of our universe today. But first, boy, do I have some thoughts on something from an old friend that I wanted to get into before it just passed into the ether of the 24-hour news cycle and we totally forgot about it. Because there are so many different angles to this story that I'm sure you saw out there. Bryan Shaw reportedly. Now, how do I even begin here? Because even the headline that's been out there, and Patrick Saunders is a friend, and the Denver Post does their thing, and they're an institution of our city, and one I'm damned proud of. But the headline, I feel, in this case was a little bit misleading, and it was Bryan Shaw blames Coors Field and altitude for his struggles. Spicy stuff. Very, very spicy stuff. Um, Now, if you read the actual quotes, you saw that Bryan Shaw did not at any point say, "Hey, I was bad and it's all Coors Field's fault and Coors Field ruined my career." He didn't say anything like that. He talked very specifically about how pitching there and trying to throw his slider became particularly difficult. The movement being different for him as a pitcher who's based entirely on movement, that he found that to be troublesome. So, Patrick, I wanted to get some of your thoughts on this too, but then I wanted to respond to what I feel are the vast majority of the responses to this Bryan Shaw thing. I figure you'll probably tackle some of them in your initial responses here, but I wanted to let you have first shot at this thing before I go on what is likely to be a little bit of a rant here.
A diatribe, if you will, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think the headline probably was a bit misleading because it does make you think that Bryan Shaw maybe has not taken ownership over his 2 years with the Colorado Rockies. But again, when you go on and read the quotes, you actually see that he was not really speaking ill of Coors Field or the Rockies organization or anything like that. Just simply saying, "Man, we tried to do a lot of different things," and he said "we" in it many times. He didn't say the Rockies staff, which I'm no longer a part of, so it really is them. He said "we." It was all a part of this thing. Um, had worked together towards a common goal, and ultimately, my best pitch and the most effective pitch that makes me me was not there for me. And we tried to figure out different ways and different solutions. Shaw was one of those guys who last off season in the 2018-19 off season started going to Driveline with several other members of the organization. So, he was all for trying to solve this thing and would have continued to do that in 2020, try to figure out a way to get the best out of Bryan Shaw under these conditions. As it were, the Rockies cut bait with him, and naturally, someone immediately jumped up and said, "Yeah, we would love to sign you," particularly since Seattle was a team that had a lot of interest in Colorado. And in fact, I think that was the place that Bryan and his family wanted to go.
Right.
But all things considered, when you're a reliever and a guy who really only has one crack at free agency, if another team jumps up and offers even just a little bit more, an extra three, the difference between 24 million and 23 million dollars is over 10%. Like that's a decent amount. It's 12.5%.
Right.
So Seattle was the fit he wanted to go with, but again, doing right by his family, he went to Colorado and assumed everything would work out right. And I think for a lot of people, it does work out right. And he would have done it 10 out of 10 times again, and so would most other players, taking the deal that was just better for his family's future. Because really, what is the difference between being a Mariner and being a Rockies player? We might know a little bit of the differences, and I know fans would have a lot to say about those differences. But ultimately, when you're a player, you just want to be a part of a successful franchise that has some opportunities to go to the postseason and go deep. And both of these teams feel like I am one of those missing pieces. This team is going to offer me more. Well, shoot, I'd be a fool to not take that. So getting back to your main question there, it was a lot of much ado about nothing. I don't think Shaw really harbors any ill will because the Rockies organization did not, do this to his career, did not derail his career in this way. Coors Field is not any kind of Event Horizon type spacecraft that's haunted and forces this thing that prevents pitchers from doing their best and derailing their careers. It's not any kind of haunted stadium like that. It just is what it is, and I think Bryan Shaw gets that. And ultimately, it seems that's all he was saying.
I
What
think you're
say
right
you,
about all
Mr.
of it.
Creasman?
Yeah, yeah.
What say you?
Well put. I think that you've done a great job of laying the foundation here, making sure we've got all of our ducks in a row and
Sure.
understand that what the conversation is about. I think what the meta conversation is about is what I want to remind people of. I have to be careful not to sound like I'm preaching to people out here now, but I feel like all of us in the Rockies community, whether you're a fan, a journalist, who are particularly interested in this team and in the Coors Field question, need to be careful to completely dismiss what Bryan Shaw is saying. And I have seen a lot of this in particular ways coming from doesn't matter where they're coming from. I'll just put it that way. There are a lot of misnomers about what Coors Field is, what it does, and how legitimate of a quote unquote excuse it is for your performance. Furthermore, even if your position is, I want to dunk as hard as I can on Bryan Shaw right now, which seems to be, I'd say, the 90% majority position, I think recognizing, if you want to take it to its worst conclusion from that angle, that Bryan Shaw is or was fundamentally incapable of handling Coors Field, if you want to think of it that way, it should be understood then when you look at other Colorado Rockies moves, acquisitions, deacquisitions, that you can't just look at a set of numbers on a piece of paper and say so and so ought to be brought in to Coors Field. Because the numbers on a piece of paper for Bryan Shaw before he arrived at Coors Field were remarkably consistent and incredibly promising. And so to dismiss the notion that Coors Field may have, to use a phrase that was oft applied to Jeremy Guthrie, gotten in his head, when you dismiss that out of hand and say, no, dude, you're just a bad pitcher, you're not recognizing a unique hurdle that this organization absolutely has to climb. Now, is it still a failure on their part that they didn't know that Bryan Shaw would be the type of guy that would crumble under that pressure? Arguably so. You can definitely make that argument that they should be doing a better job after the Jeremy Guthries and the Denny Nagels and the Mike Hamptons and all the guys we've seen come in here and Coors Field get into their head. But let us not dismiss the notion out of hand that, oh, no, 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 no. So I've seen this, right? Well, didn't stop Scott Oberg. It didn't stop Adam Ottavino. I've seen a number of people bring up his name, and I kind of laugh a little bit at that one, Patrick. This notion that Adam Ottavino was some grand conqueror of altitude who never at once struggled with Coors Field. Adam Ottavino spoke to me personally many, many times about the struggles pitching at Coors and then going on the road and having his slider have 4 to 5 inches difference in its movement in those two places. And how do you handle that? And I'm going to get back to that with another element of it here. But Patrick, I wanted you to weigh in on this part of it because pitchers, it's like when the Rockies were playing themselves and we talked about the false dichotomy. Coors Field is a thing you have to overcome. So deny that Bryan Shaw was able to overcome it for sure. But when you point to like Scott Oberg in the last 2 years and you forget the 2 years before it, or Adam Ottavino his last year and you forget the year before it, and you say, well, all these guys apparently had no problems. No, every single one of these guys knows exactly what Bryan Shaw is talking about.
I think this is something that in the 28th season of the Colorado Rockies, it's something that we don't have answers to yet. It's something that the analytics department of the Colorado Rockies are really going to be the only ones that will ever be able to figure out why it is that some guys have more success than others. And some of it obviously has to do with the players. We're not talking about Babe Ruth versus Pat Valleca, giving him his second shout out of the week. We're talking about two, equal quality players of a Scott Oberg, Bryan Shaw. Bryan Shaw has a much better pedigree than Scott Oberg.
Right.
Yet Oberg is the one having success at Coors Field, and Shaw isn't. So it's really about the type of player, I should say. It's the pitches that these guys throw, and that again, only an analytics department can figure out, what type of vertical, horizontal, diagonal movement, whatever it is. Those answers haven't been figured out yet, and it's probably a question that the other 29 teams haven't answered either. Like, well, how can you guarantee success and a future rate with a guy who throws this pitch and he's thrown this many innings? Is it more likely to create a Tommy John type situation? So these are questions that all of baseball is still trying to answer. And maybe someday the Rockies will be able to figure out, when they negotiate with a free agent, they get him in, do a physical, and then they, take a look at the guy's, spin rate and various elements that make up this pitcher. Or we can talk about the hitting side another day, but punch into their calculators and go, wow, this guy is still going to be impacted by Coors Field, but he's going to be okay. He's going to be that Ober category or even an Ottavino category of like, there's going to be a major difference. There can't not be a major difference between 5,000 feet and 0 feet. But the impact will be minimal, and we think this guy will be fine. Whereas this other player, who's equally as talented, you know what? The details of how he pitches and the movement that he gets on certain off-speed pitches, et cetera, actually suggest he might be more of a Mike Hampton or Bryan Shaw or Jake McGee type, if you will. And until that data is at least fully well known by the Rockies, and it's not yet, and again, it's not known really by any of the 30 teams, we're going to continue to go through this anytime the Rockies sign a free agent and to try to figure out, is this actually a good fit? It's fine for the other 29 teams to ask that question, and they will probably very quickly be able to say yes, no, or maybe. The Rockies, it will be, we don't know until it's over yet. We won't know until the guy is gone, and we go, hey, how do we all feel about this, guys? Let's huddle up.
That work?
Let's huddle up. Was that good? No? No? Okay, yeah. We all decided that was bad.
Right. Yeah, and there's always going to be a mental component to it too, the part you won't be able to measure. But you're right, at the very least, they've got to start to really nail down the analytics. And from what I understand, a lot of work has gone on recently. It should have been started years ago, but at least the work is going on now. So we'll see what comes of it. There's one last element, believe it or not, still of this thing that I wanted to talk about. And I just want to say up top, free pass. I didn't write down names, okay? I'm not calling anybody out. I saw everyone do it, and I'm not calling anybody out. We've all got to get out of this habit. Please, when people talk about Coors Field, I am begging you, don't go straight to the splits. Ever. Stop doing that. There has to be a more nuanced conversation. The notion that Bryan Shaw's problem wasn't Coors Field because he pitched well or pitched better at Coors Field last year than he did on the road completely misses the point. And again, like I said, I'm letting everybody off the hook. I didn't write down any names. I saw everybody on Twitter. It's all fine. And I get where it comes from. It's the natural thing to do. Dude, if Coors is your issue, how come you better at Coors than you are out on the road? I know I've mentioned it several times and it's such a cheap self-plug, but that article I wrote with Chad Bettis at the end of 2018, go back and read that or to recount for you here. And as we said a moment ago, if your pitch moves 4 inches more on the road than it does at home, you might think, well, then you've got a huge advantage out on the road. Not necessarily, because you have far less control over the pitch if you don't know what it's going to do. I had a conversation specifically with John Gray when he changed the grip on his fastball because he was getting too much movement, too much run from right to left if you're watching on TV for a right-handed pitcher. What that did essentially was when he's trying to throw a fastball outside to a right-handed batter, it would run back over the middle of the plate. You want some movement. You want it to run back and catch the edge right there. But it was running 3-4 inches more than he wanted to. Movement on your fastball is good. Not when it runs it right to the middle of the plate, it's not. So if Bryan Shaw is trying to throw a cutter that at Coors Field starts at the right-hander's back hip and cuts to the inside and just nips the edge, and then he goes to Atlanta and that pitch starts a little bit inside and ends up right down the middle of the plate, the fact that he got more movement is not a good thing. Coors Field, whether you're a hitter or a pitcher, you have to make adjustments that other people in baseball don't have to make. And that's going to lead to extreme splits. Sometimes it's on the road as opposed to at home. That doesn't mean that it's not still because of Coors Field. Patrick, did I explain that clearly?
Yeah, no, I think so. I was trying to think of a metaphor for it. I used to be a bowler. I was a two-sport athlete, baseball and bowling. They go hand in hand. If you're good at one, you're clearly going to be good at the other. Me and Mookie Betts, anyway.
Hundo.
And each lane kind of has their own different oiling system. So, one day you're like, oh, I got to stand over here. Another day I need to put a little more English on my ball, a little more spin. I need to throw it to this board, right? Well, the other 29 teams, when they're playing at sea level, they are basically playing on the same lane. They know exactly what their ball is going to do every single time, and it doesn't change no matter what ballpark. It's going to be the same thing. But for the Colorado Rockies, it's as if they're bowling on one set of lanes with extra oil, and they got to do this, that, and the other to try to get any movement on their ball. And then the next week, they are somewhere else, and they go, wow, I played great last week. I was nearly perfect. All right, I bowled a 280. I was close. I was one strike away, and yet I got to forget everything that happened last week because now I got to do something different. Now I got to look, and I need to throw a couple balls before I can even figure out what's working, what isn't. Now I need to stand over here, and I need to do this. And it just changes everything from that week-to-week basis. And even though hey, I'm getting more movement, I'm getting more tilt on some of my off-speed pitches, like John Gray said, you don't know how much yet, and you have to see it first. And
right.
You're noticing it in the bullpens, obviously, but it's still like, wow, how do I approach this differently? And every time they go home, every time they go on the road, they have to approach things unlike any other team in Major League Baseball.
Right. John getting at, I think what I'm talking about here, says we don't like splits for the batters, but like them for the pitching. Why? And that's exactly right. That's why I would implore people to remind, be aware of the splits. Allow them to be a part of the conversation. But remember that Coors Field is not about, hey, when you're there, it does X. Coors Field is all about the adjustments to and from. That's what it is. That's why I've tried to get away from calling it the hangover effect. We've worked on the margin of error, which I think makes it more clear that it goes both ways because it's not something that only affects the Rockies when they're at home. And it undercuts all of our arguments for Todd Helton and Larry Walker and Nolan Arenado for MVP and stuff like that when we say, oh, Bryan Shaw, your problem wasn't Coors Field. It was just that you were bad. And also you were better at home than on the road, not realizing that trying to pitch in two different places like that might be part of the reason why a guy's ERA would have dramatically different splits one way or the other. It's about the adjustments, not just the environment you're in on that day.
So we're talking kill the split or forget the split.
Ooh.
That might be better. Manny's got kill the win, so we may have to go to forget the split.
Can we do hashtag forget the split? Forget the split, man. Forget the split. All right. Mile High Mems wants to know, I know the sample size is small, but did pitching numbers from Mile High reveal the same thing? Well, and I don't know about that. I'd have to go back and do the research on the, that's, now you're talking pre-Humidor and a different stadium, and I wonder if we've got, I
imagine it would be much of the same
because so.
It's just a variable of altitude and the thickness of air and or thinness of air, I should say. But I imagine it was much of the same. In those first 2 years, it was just like, whoa, there's games being played. Cool. It didn't really matter
Right.
what the win-loss record was. Didn't
Right.
really matter who was playing each week. It was just a party. And now we're at the point we're getting close to 30 years without a World Series championship, and it's all of these little things that stack up, right? Like
Right.
who's having the success in the bullpen? Okay, who should be targeted for free agency, because that's what we're getting to, is all these little minor details. It's not good enough anymore to just be a part of the game, to just be a cog in the wheel. Rockies now have somebody in Cooperstown. That wasn't good enough to just, to be able to visit and to have a couple artifacts. Because let's face it, when I was there last summer, there were only a handful of artifacts. In fact, I took a photograph of every piece of
Every single one of
memorabilia.
them. Yeah.
Yes, baseball, there was a lot of baseball. I don't know if you know this, before 1993, and people value that a lot more because they weren't around to see it. So I could almost literally tell you there was about 20 pieces of artifacts for the Rockies, and about 17 of them were in one case. All 30 teams got a case saying, all right, here's some memorabilia from the last couple of years. Most of it was just in that case. So it's great that the Rockies are now on the board with one Hall of Famer. But in a lot of ways, it's like, okay, now you got to get past that next hurdle to win a World Series. And that's what we're trying to figure out here now is, how do you do that? And how do you do that from a relief pitcher, a free agent standpoint, and kind of learning from those mistakes so that you can finally raise that trophy one day?
Yeah, there was one thing that Brian Shaw that said that I totally forgot about, by the way, where he said, I do think, and there's legitimacy to this. He said, I think they got rid of me more for financial reasons than to make spots for some of the younger guys, which is true. You cost too much money, and young guys need to play, but also you weren't pitching well, Brian. I mean, come on, you weren't getting guys out in summer camp either. So that is also a fact of the matter. Well, if you're listening to us live, and if you're not, by the way, make sure you're subscribed to that YouTube channel. You click the bell icon so you never miss out when we go live. Sometimes it's mid-afternoon, 3 o'clock during the day. Sometimes it's right after the games. Oftentimes it's both, which is what we're doing today. So we are recording this just before the Oakland A's series. We will, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you'll already have heard our recap of the first game. But Patrick, of course, we're hoping that there will still be baseball, that we don't just have to get totally into rugby. Now I'm getting into rugby. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go ahead. I'm 90% in, right? I'm going to go ahead and go down to Infinity Park. I'm going to check it out there in Glendale, especially because it has become the home of the official training center, I should say, of the men's and women's USA Eagles 15 teams, making Colorado the place to be for rugby. Very, very excited to get out there. I just hope it doesn't have to be a replacement. I hope that I get to enjoy rugby in its natural environment and out there in the world, that they're doing well, because other sports are indeed doing well. I hope that these rugby guys out at Infinity Park are following some of the same protocols as they return, that the NHL and the NBA are. Not so sure we can hold up our own league as an example right now, Patrick.
I think the New Zealand All Blacks are doing great. Their training is going wonderfully. They don't really have to worry about too many protocols at all, as
Yeah,
one of the premier rugby teams of the world, and in one of the premier healthy countries in the world as well, for New
yeah,
Zealand, that is.
they're doing fine. The Miami Marlins, on the other hand, and really the eastern seaboard of baseball right now, going through some things. Now, we went through yesterday, and we're not going to rehash all of the stuff we had to say about the Marlins and Don Mattingly. But now there is talk of completely reworking the schedule and having the Philly or the Yankees go play the Orioles when the Marlins we're really
Mm-hmm.
doing we're really gonna do all for the Marlins. We're gonna make way. Now look, I know it's harsh, and I know podcasts and live shows, and look, I'm not talking Radiohead guy. I'm a Radiohead guy. That's a different. I'm not that dude. But we talked about how there were teams in European football that had to get cut out. You can't look. The rest of us are going to play. You guys didn't follow the rules. You didn't stay healthy. You're endangering everybody else around you. What's the commissioner waiting for? I mean, the numbers went up again today, right? There were that many more people, and I know it's easy for me to say we don't do DNVR Marlins. Like I get it, but what are we doing here? Why? We're really going to move the schedule around, and we're going to force the Yankees to play different teams, and I guess the Orioles, as much as it were, teams that are in it, teams that aren't, teams that haven't done anything wrong. We've all got to completely rework this situation so that the Marlins can figure their stuff out.
Yeah, I think with some other sports, I don't want to overuse the phrase small sample size, but as you alluded to with the MLS playoffs, they had a system in place where, look, if you weren't playing games from day one, then you can't move on to the later rounds, right, in their format, in their system. Baseball is much longer. So even in a shortened season, even in 1/3 of the season, it's still pretty damn long to think every day you wake up, there's going to be a baseball game there for you for 2+ months. I mean, that's one of the gifts and curse of this sport. And that's why we love it so much, It's why it continues to break our hearts, as they say.
That's right. That's right.
And so you could get away with having a team just kind of sit idly by there. The Marlins are going to be shut down until at least Sunday. The mayor of Miami has come out and said that he doesn't necessarily hope, but he wants the team to make sure that they have proper quarantining. So they've got some home games in early August, and they would have to forego those games or play them at the other team's ballpark. We see Toronto doing that with 2 different series. So I think they're only getting 26 of their 30 home games in Buffalo. So Miami may have to do that too, which begs the question if the New York Yankees or Boston Red Sox want the Marlins to come into their town, or if the people of that town want those players coming in. So there's just a lot of dominoes that seem to be falling. Yankees GM Brian Cashman said that it's not exactly day by day, but it is week by week. And so it's just something that's going to have to be re-examined. And 1981 was really the only season in which all teams didn't have the same general amount of games played. We mentioned this on Monday's podcast that sometimes teams will only play 160, 161. Obviously, we know when they have a game 163, that means that team's playing more, but that's really just to break a tie between 2 teams. So in this case, it really just will be winning percentage. So it's strange to think that, okay, the Yankees are getting an advantage here because they now get to play Baltimore twice. But I would argue it isn't an advantage because if they don't win both of those games, that means the split for those 2 games is 500 winning percentage. So that's going to bring their winning percentage down. So they now have to win that game, both of those games, to kind of keep pace with what they're trying to do. So it's incredibly strange. Philadelphia, we didn't have any new tests for the Phillies, but of course, kind of monitoring that situation. So Marlins and Phillies will not have any games until Friday at the earliest. Phillies, Friday at the earliest. Miami will be early next week at the earliest. And it's week to week. It's still day to day, but maybe it's week to week.
Yeah, we're just going to have to keep following it and find out what happens. But yeah, again, as we said yesterday, you got to hope baseball gets this under control before it gets completely out of control.
We didn't get a chance to mention it yesterday, but one of the things that MLB wanted to do, and it was, again, bottom of the list of priorities, was they wanted to do they called it a 2-team free agent league. And it really wasn't a league. It was just, look, we want to have basically a 31st team of players in case, I don't know, the Marlins have 17 of their players come down with this and can't play for 2 weeks. We just need somebody to get inside that piece of laundry to keep the wheel moving along. So they were going to do this in Nashville. I think they were even going to possibly have some fans come out to those games. At least that's what the city of Nashville wanted to do at the time. And it would be basically quadruple A players going out, applying their trade, staying fresh so that if the Marlins, in this situation, have no catchers, they can go, all right, well, we're just going to kind of borrow those guys. It's like when you're building Legos and you've got this,
Right.
you go into that box of Legos or something you had built
That one
previously when
is.
you were a kid, and you go, I'm just going to snap that piece off of that and just use this to keep it moving. There are two guys that the Marlins have claimed in the past 24 hours, and you got to say, like, shoot, those poor guys. Oh, I got claimed. I'm not going to, have to go to a satellite city. And, oh, there's a team that wants me. Who is it? Oh, the Marlins, or as I'm now referring to them, the Miami guinea pigs, because let's face it, that's what they are right now.
They're just trying stuff. And Mile High Mems, I've seen a lot of people asking this question. And again, the caveat always should be applied. We are not doctors. There are experts in this field, and we highly implore that you seek them out and listen to them. But on the question, should baseball have gone to bubble formats, four locations? The one thing I'll say is I know it's different from the other sports. It's not as easy to do as it would be for the NBA and the NHL. And I do know that there was some pushback by the players' union against it. But to me, the obvious big hurdle there was the only place that you can really do that, or the only places where you can really do that, were Arizona and Florida. And Arizona and Florida were the two places that were the biggest hot spots right as the union and the league came to terms. And so there was just, I ran into it. There's a political wall you run into there at that point, but there's no one to blame in baseball specifically for that. There were two states that have a viable opportunity that have warm weather and multiple facilities set up for people to play baseball every single day and for all the teams to be able to get it. We can't do that in Colorado. You can't do it in Minnesota. Maybe New York, but again, another major hotspot, and maybe California, another major hotspot. And those are your only options, really. And so, as Patrick and I have said sort of loosely and generally throughout this thing, if everyone had done their part and done what they needed to do in the early stages, that would have been a possibility. But these states were not safe enough, and no players were going to sign off on doing that.
Yeah, you also have, NHL and the NBA, they don't play every single game every day. So you don't have every team every day. So you can stagger these games so you can have 3 or 4 each day. There are 15 games every day in MLB. Not literally, because there are off days, but we're ultimately talking about, 5 days a week where all 30 teams and 15 games are being played. Where can you do that? And even if you say, okay, let's just pick 4 cities or 4 general locations. Texas was one of those because they've got 2 dome stadiums. Right. They actually have 3 because I think Globe Life Park, the old stadium, that old 25-year-old stadium, I think that's still there. I think that might be repurposed for one of the colleges. So maybe you could have done that, but you have the issue of like, where are all these players going to stay? Marley Rivera of ESPN just recently had tweeted something out on Tuesday afternoon that she had talked to a lot of different coaches and managers throughout the league, and one team was staying at a hotel that was hosting a wedding. There were a lot of people there, none of them socially distancing. I don't want to say naturally, but obviously if it's a wedding, it's friends, it's family. So you now have, even within, you think each of those cities, each of the 15 cities that host a game on a day-to-day basis is like a little mini bubble. No, it's not. So I don't know how you would do that.
Basketball and hockey teams are like 12 dudes. I don't know what the NFL is going to do, but,
the NBA has more guys on the court with towels and squeegees than they do on the teams. To be fair, the grounds...
That's a fact.
The grounds crew is big on MLB, but they can only have a 24-man roster. So it will forever be more on the team than on the grounds crew.
Look at you bringing the baseball stats. Totally true. 25, now 26-man roster that you got to fly around on the team plane and staff and all this and play every day. So I don't know that the bubble ever would have been feasible unless those just places were a little better off. And Rockies Club, isn't that a question we'd all love to have the answer to? Do we see them finishing out the season and postseason? Oh, it's a podcast. No one can see that gesture. I apologize.
Oh.
So join us for the live YouTube so you can see the gestures. Folks. You got to subscribe to the YouTube if you want to see the. I don't know.
I probably would have taken before the season. I would have said no. They're probably not going to finish the season. I mean, it's either there's if you don't crown a World Series champion, it doesn't matter if it stops a week before the end of the season on September 20th, or if it stops on October 20th, and you're down to 4 teams. Right? You have the ALCS and the NLCS.
Yeah,
It
we're
really doesn't matter
right.
when in that window. And so if it's just were we going to be able to play out a World Series? No, I no. There's science is fact or it's based upon fact, not emotion, not on the creed or color of your skin or the character of your yada yada yakety schmackety. It's science.
It's just
That's
it
it.
is. Yeah.
It is what it is.
It's yeah. It does not care for what we want to have happen. One thing
Yeah.
I could see is baseball coming to some sort of panicky. All right. Somebody asked earlier. I missed it as we're getting ready to sign off here. So sorry if I can't find a name. Will they play? Will it be a percentage? Will they just decide, hey, look, the season has to end? If there are 4 teams that have had no cases that have the top percentages, okay, you guys play you guys play, there it is, Mile High Mems, yeah. And then, play a quick World Series before shutting it down. I could see them trying to rush in something like that rather than cancel it. But literally, like, if we've played 25 games and then they play a 4-team playoff, again, I'm not going to say no to more baseball, but
I mean, there's
the Marlins
already
did this to us. Really, the
yeah.
Marlins.
We're already living in a quest for, dare I say, the asterisk.
Yep.
Hashtag quest for the asterisk. We're
Hashtag.
already living in that world. So if you do play for a month, then you have to shut the season down and you say, all right, we're going to have 6 teams in the playoff, right? 3 from each league. Let's say the Dodgers have the best record, and then you've got the other 2 divisions. You've got the Phillies playing against the Cardinals, and it's a one game like wild card. Phillies Cardinals 1 game. Whoever wins immediately goes and plays the Dodgers. And again, it's in some location, and it's a 3-game series. And then the World Series, they would still almost need to have it be 7 games. That would be fine. There'd be a lot of teams
I'll
that
take it.
should have. Yeah, there's a lot of teams that would have been the wild card, a natural wild card at the 4th best record. They're the teams, 5 through 8 that go, oh shoot, this was supposed to be our chance. But for the good of the game, they would go, that's fine, whatever. Just so you can, make sure that you sell the merchandise, you do all those things. They would be in favor of it. But again, we're a much more knowledgeable world. And I don't know what city within the United States or even Canada or even Mexico would say, bring those 6 teams here. We will accommodate them
Yeah,
because
after everything
I don't know
that's
that it would happen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's what I can promise you, Rockies Club, Will, Mile High Mems, everyone else who's joined us throughout the day, and we really appreciate it because we don't know what the future of baseball holds. We don't know. All we can promise you is that we're going to be here every day, hopefully talking about Rockies baseball. We are day to day as well. There's a series with Oakland going on right now. We're going to discuss that. Then there's an off day. Then presumably there will be a home opener in Denver, and we're going to walk you through all of that. I plan on being down there at Coors Field for that and seeing how that goes. And we're going to live through all of whatever it is that happens in these next couple of weeks and months together. So thank you all for sticking around with us. Make sure that you're subscribed to the DNVR.com so you don't miss out on any of the written content. You're following us on social media at Patrick D. Lyons, at Drew Creasman, at DNVR_Rockies. You're picking up some cool merchandise. In fact, there's not only new merchandise here at the DNVR, there's a whole new beat. Any of you out there who are really into the golf stuff, we're not just talking about the video game golf stuff. We all know you play WGT. You're awesome at it, and I suck. I know. You've told me. I've seen the screenshots. Keep talking trash at me. Bring it. I'll eventually get good. Just bring it. I can take it. But for you real golf fans, we have just recently launched DNVR Golf. Super excited to have the Smith brothers on board for that. So exactly right, a little golf clap for them. Very good. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and get that DNVR polo because it is straight fire. With a new DNVR beat means new DNVR merch from our boy D-Line. So check out all of that stuff. Otherwise, we can only hope that you continue to be absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.